May 26, 2021, and I'd like to call this meeting of the Macomb Township Board of Trustees to order. The time is 6:30 p.m. We will now say the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk Posey, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Trustee Cusimano?
Here.
Trustee Lucido?
Here.
Trustee Oliver?
Here.
Trustee Nevers?
Present.
Trustee Drollet?
Here.
Clerk Posey? Here. Supervisor Viviano?
Here. Moving on to approval of the agenda. Clerk Posey, are there any additions, deletions, or corrections?
I have none at this time.
Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So move.
Support.
Any discussion? There's a motion by Treasurer Gillette, supported by Trustee Nevers, to approve the agenda as presented. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That motion carries. Approval of the bills. Is there a motion?
So moved. Support.
Is that you?
Yep. Trustee Drollet.
Treasurer. Did I say Trustee Gillette?
Not you.
All right. Is there any discussion on the bill run?
Mr. Chairman, I would note that there's a Bodman PLC bill in the amount of $12,927.17. For dates of service, I've learned from finance, which would complete and close out that legal firm's representation of the township.
That is correct.
I had voted against the retention at the amounts, but in respect for the solemnity of the decisions of this board, I just wanted to confirm that closed that firm out, and that there'll be no more further bills for legal services.
That is correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
If there's no more discussion on the bill run, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Approval of the previous meeting minutes from May 12th, 2021, and the closed session meeting minutes from May 12th, 2021. Do any of the board members have any additions, deletions, or corrections to the previous meeting's minutes?
Mr. Chair, I have one correction to the previous meeting minutes from May 12th, 2021. Item 24 should read, facilities and grounds staff members to be paid $12 to $15 per hour and not 17. So the correction will be amended in the meeting minutes approved.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the previous meeting minutes as amended?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? There is a motion by Clerk Posey, supported by Trustee Cusimano, to approve the previous meeting's minutes and the closed sessions meeting's minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That motion carries. All right, moving on to public comment. If there is anyone in the audience who wishes to participate from public comment, please approach the podium to your right. Please remember that you have a 3-minute time limit. This is on agenda items only. No one in the gallery wishes to speak at this time. Mr. Ivanowski, is there anybody on Zoom who wishes to participate in public comment at this time?
Nobody wishing to speak at the current moment, sir.
There's no hands?
Nope. If you are on the phone, please press star 9 if you wish to speak.
All right, seeing if there's no one who wishes to speak at this time, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the consent agenda in its entirety.
Support.
Any discussion on the consent items?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Trustee Cusimano would like to amend the motion to withdraw for separate vote the clerk's office request in item 8A. There is a legal defense fund, which is optional, for in the amount of $211.26, which I believe that the board should discuss in more detail before voting.
So move the consent agenda in its entirety minus item 8A.
That's correct. It's a friendly amendment.
Okay?
Is there? Okay. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Is there a reason that we're going to be removing the MTA dues, Mr. Kuzma?
Yes. And if I call you judge, no disrespect intended, I appeared before several Judge Vivianos.
Probably more disrespectful to the judge.
The MTA invoice dated May 15th, 2021 includes your annual dues for July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2022 is $7,042.00. Item 2 in that same paragraph, your legal defense fund contribution for the year is parentheses optional at $211.26. It's been for a total of $72.53.26. It's been presented to the board as a complete package. I want to explore what the $211.26 supports. It sounds like a legislative advocacy program, but whether or not the board is inclined to that option that particular additional expense. I understand it's a lot. I mean, it's not a lot of money, but it is 3% of the total bill.
Mr. Tomlinson, did you have a comment?
I do, Mr. Supervisor. So the Legal Defense Fund by the Michigan Township Association is basically utilized for hiring of counsel to file essentially amicus briefs with the Supreme Court on issues that may affect in a broad way the various townships throughout the state of Michigan. So that's the purpose of that separate funding, is to allow them to hire counsel to represent townships as a whole on very specific issues that usually are before the Supreme Court that they're filing amicus briefs on, and that's the purpose of that. It's not for necessarily advocacy from a political standpoint. It's purely for legal, participating in legal defense. An example is if Macomb Township was sued on a particular issue, let's say it's a Headley Amendment issue of some sort, and it was an issue that could potentially result in an unfavorable result to townships all through the state, generally someone will petition the Legal Defense Fund to have the MTT file or have the MTA file a brief on behalf of the MTA to state their position with regard to that particular case. So that's what the purpose of the $211.26 is.
So I'll just add on to that. I'm one of the, I don't know if anybody else refers to the MTA as much as I do, at least since I've been here. I've contacted their attorneys for issues that I've had to get information on. I get regular communications from them regarding issues that they are lobbying for in the House and in the Senate. And when these kind of issues would come up, I'm fully in support of their assistance. They're in a unique position where they represent all the townships. Our interests are almost always aligned with our other townships. So I'm in favor of continuing to keep that. And we already have the motion, but I would rather us continue to participate in it myself.
One last question or comment. Do we have any idea how many municipalities decide to opt out?
It's a question we'd have to ask the MTA.
I just want to add that I'm not disputing that we should be members of the MTA. I haven't used their resources, but I understand that's a valuable resource for the township. I'm concerned about this MTA dues plus the $211.26. I would just ask that it be subject to a vote separate. So I may cast a nay vote to that.
Okay, Chair, I was just going to ask the maker of the request, is this something that you're recommending that we not pay because we don't get benefit from it, or what is, I'm not sure,
It's not real clear to me that we get a benefit from it, other than in a general abstract way. And every dollar that is being spent at this township could be used for other things such as roads and everything. I know it's a small amount. I don't know how much sod could be laid with $211.26, but it's attention to detail, I think, is the,
So where does this go now? We take it out.
gatekeeper of the public treasury. There's the role of a trustee. And it hasn't been shown to me that this is, pertinent and beneficial based on what's been presented. It just gets thrown in. It would be similar to purchasing insurance on a rental car. When you, that's a bad analogy, but it's,
well,
why is it, well, I guess the question is, why is it optional? Why isn't it part of our, why isn't it rolled right into the total invoice
So if I
dues?
can interject, we can, there's a motion in a second, to approve the consent agenda less the portion of the MTA invoice that includes the $211.26 for the legal defense fund. If we proceed with that, we can then decide if we can have a motion and discussion on the legal defense fund separately.
Okay,
so right now the motion is for the consent agenda minus that one item set aside.
Minus the one portion of the item 8A.
Thank you.
We're not voting on 8A, we're voting on
We are voting on,
moving it from.
we are voting on 8A less the $211.26 for the legal defense fund.
okay, I
So
understand.
I will restate the motion. There is a motion on the floor to approve the consent agenda less the legal defense fund portion of the MTA dues of $211.20. Is there any more discussion on that motion? There's a motion. The motion was by Clerk Posey, supported by Treasurer Gillette. If there's no more discussion, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? That motion carries. Now, can I get a motion to approve the MTA dues portion, the legal defense fund portion of the MTA dues for $211.20?
Motion to approve.
Support.
Supervisor, it's 26 cents.
26 cents, I apologize. $211.26. Okay, now, discussion on the MTA's legal defense fund.
Mr. Chairman, without speculating, I'd ask legal counsel to tell me why, if he knows why it's optional and not rolled into the general dues.
Trustee Kozmana, I'm not sure. I don't
I
know.
appreciate that. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure if I'm inclined to vote for or against this motion because I don't believe that there's adequate information being brought forward on the issue. Perhaps if there was a case being made on why we should not pay it or why we should pay it, it's questions being asked, but there's not a case being made. That, I've called, I've looked into it. They've only done 3, cases before the court or amicus briefs, and therefore it's not worth it, or some articulation of why it should or shouldn't be paid isn't really before us. We just have this bill of $211.26. So I don't know that I have the information enough to justify having a passionate vote. It's I don't know if it's something that anybody would like to delve into.
Would you like to move to table this vote?
Well, Mr. Chair, I was going to suggest that we postpone it, move to postpone it. I can have my office look into it and get some further information on the $211.26.
I think that would give folks enough time to come back and say, I'm voting against it or I'm voting for it because of X or because of Y.
Sure, that's not a problem.
If I can make the motion to postpone,
Yep.
Yeah.
Did you make the motion?
I'll make the motion postpone.
Support.
Any discussion on the motion to postpone? There is a motion by Treasurer Drollet, supported by Trustee Lucido, to postpone the $211.26 legal defense fund portion of the MTA dues. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That motion carries. Okay, we are now going to open a public hearing for next year's budget. Stacy, would you like to
Sure.
tell us what we're going to do?
Yep. So in front of you tonight is the the preliminary budget for the 2022 budget. This is the first of two public hearings. The next one will be on June 9th. If you turn to page 1 or look at page 1, this is a summary of the 12 funds that are included in our budget. And when you look at them individually, the general fund, fire improvement fund, municipal roadway, building authority, all reflect a shortfall for the year, whereas the fire operating, park and rec, revolving, law enforcement, public improvement, fire pension, retiree health, and water and sewer exhibit a surplus. That's when you look at them individually. There are actually 3 funds that are supported in some way or heavily by the general fund contributions. Those are the public improvement, municipal roadway, and park and rec fund. I believe you have some supplemental information maybe in front of you that shows those 4 funds kind of combined. When you do that, it shows a net income of 50 cents for the year, or $1, it rounds up. The detailed items are for all of these funds are located on pages 3 through 39. There are over 1,400 line items, of which the 3 full-time elected officials, department heads, and myself went through every single line item, one by one. The 2021 anticipated millage rates, along with their projected revenues of each using the taxable values from March of 2021, are displayed on page 2. And at this time, I'll open it up for any comments, questions, suggestions that anyone may have.
All right, thank you, Stacy. At this time, we are opening the public hearing, and the time is 6:47 p.m. If any members of the public would like to ask a question or have a comment on our preliminary budget, you may approach the podium, and anybody who is listening in at home on Zoom, feel free to raise your hand digitally and you will be called on.
Good evening, Ben Cochran, 46290 Fairchild Road. I just had a quick question about it. The Municipality Roads Fund, and you said that and a couple other funds were negative the 3, but the total came to plus 50 cents. Isn't $500,000 of the Municipality Road funds going towards the pathway project?
Yes.
I believe.
Yeah, municipal roadway and sidewalks.
Okay, so
yes.
so it's, with all 4 combined, it's ahead 50 cents. By itself, it's negative, yet $500,000 is going towards the pathway project.
Yes.
That's all I need to know.
Yep, you're correct.
Any other questions from those of you who are here in the gallery? Okay, hearing none. Is there anybody online, Mr. Ivanowski?
Mr. Supervisor, nobody willing to speak at this moment.
Okay, if there's no more questions on the budget, I'm going to close the public hearing, and the time is 6:49 p.m.
Mr. Chairman, I had one question for Stacy.
Sure.
Could you give examples of the types of projects that are funded through the Public Improvement Fund versus the Building Authority Fund?
To date, there has not been much run through the Public Improvement Fund. Probably 10, 12 years ago, $3 million was moved into there. It started being used a couple years ago with the broadcast media to do some upgrades. They were contributing 10 to 15,000, I think, a year. And then the clerk's office had put some money in there a few years back, I think 5 years ago, and there has been some drawdown with some of the election equipment out of that fund as well. This year, I think there's budgeted 10,000 in possible election equipment and nothing else in the public improvement. And then, you said the municipal roadway?
No, building
Oh,
authority.
Building
fund.
authority, I'm sorry, building authority.
That would be, that's not part of the fire department's.
Yeah, so currently, that is the only thing that's run through here is any of the big bond projects. So the only one we have in the last couple of years was the public safety building.
Okay.
So that's why it's showing probably a negative fund balance at the end of next year, and then we'll probably get rid of that fund until we have another bond issue for a new project, or if there is one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all I have at this time.
Thank you, trustee Kuzma. All right, moving on to new business. Item 10 is we have a request for permission to execute a revised cost-sharing agreement for the design and construction costs with the Macomb County Department of Roads for the 25-mile road Garfield Romeo Roundabout in the amount of $1,309,000. Do I have a motion?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Support.
Mr. Van Tifflin, are you available?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, board members. The Department of Roads has recently sent the township this cost-sharing agreement. This is intended to replace the cost-sharing agreement that was approved by the township board about 2.5 years ago in October of 2018. That agreement called for the project to cost the township $765,000. The Department of Roads has given us this with some reasoning as to why the cost has gone up to the 1.309 that was read off in the agenda. That has to do with the increased scene with 23 Mile Road. Additionally, they had to do some study work on the roundabout associated with the extension of Garfield between 22 and 25 Mile, as well as some redesign that was a result of that study. So with that, we're asking for authorization for the supervisor to sign the agreement so that they can start construction on this project, hopefully within the next month. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Van Tifflin. I don't think that speaker's working, it's my guess. All right. Is there any discussion or questions on this?
Mr. Chair, I just have more of a comment, and that is, this is not the first estimate that, or payment for a road project that's come in recently that's been substantially above original projections. And I just like to comment that as we're putting together the proposed budget for the upcoming cycle, we did what we could to adjust expectations for the cost of road projects, which have been skyrocketing recently. And is no doubt the most serious element of our proposed budget as far as having to scale back what we think we need to, the projects we'd like to do in this township. Issues like 22 Mile Road and Romeo Plank, and we've got commitments to finish 23 Mile Road. So this is more of a comment that this is not anything that we can blame on any particular entity. It's just that the costs around the state and the country have been skyrocketing astronomically in the last year for road projects, and it's a serious concern moving forward. And we've had to make adjustments to the preliminary budget, trying to anticipate how those costs might play out. And it's very challenging to try and address the needs, of road project needs. So that's more context, because I think we've starting to get, unfortunately, used to seeing these upgrades and these costs that have been coming through, and unfortunately, we're just having to deal with them right now. We still need to move forward on the roads.
Thank you, Treasurer Gillette. Any other questions or discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. This has been calculated into the preliminary budget that was just subject to public hearing, correct?
Yes, it has.
Thank you. That's all I have.
And just to add on to what Treasurer Gillette said, one of the items, I guess this isn't related to this item, but just in addition to his comment regarding the budget, the 22 Mile Road the Garfield expansion from 22 to 23 is something we already paid for a year ago, which hasn't started yet. We've already budgeted for that to be over, just because we know it will be. The time lag between the cost estimates that we execute with the county and the time that we put a shovel in the ground, it goes on 2 years or more. So the last 2 years, construction costs have just ballooned. So we are anticipating everything that we'd like to do is going to cost a lot more, and that's what happened here.
Mr. Chairman, if I may add to that, just insight is when we do these cost sharing agreements with the county, they are taking on the added expenses as well. It's not just our side, both sides incur the additional expenses that we're all seeing due to the pandemic. So it's both sides that are experiencing these influx in project costs. That's all I have.
Thank you.
One quick question and follow up that. Does the state help with this, or is it
Not
just the
the-
county? And
Not this one. The
This road
23-mile
is
road had state funding, and unfortunately, their state funding was capped. So we actually got a hit with a much larger percentage increase over the total project. This one, the dollar volume is pretty high because only us and the county are doing this
we're
project.
sharing it. Okay, thank you.
Any more? Hearing none, we have a motion by Clerk Posey. Oops, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong one. Clerk, motion by Treasurer Gillette, supported by Trustee Oliver. I'll get it right. To execute the revised cost sharing agreement with the Macomb County Department of Roads in the amount of $1,309,000. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That motion carries. Item 11 is an amendment to the Township of Macomb Code of Ordinances, Chapter 12, Section 12-304, medical marijuana. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Tomlinson, could you give us some context here?
Yes, Mr. Supervisor. As the board is aware, we recently amended our zoning ordinance to deal with the medical marijuana caregiver issue. We also have a regulatory ordinance on the books. That included several provisions for caregivers and their ability to do their work and grow within residential units. So to be consistent with our zoning ordinance, we've revised the regulatory ordinance so that they are parallel or read together. They deal with the same issue, and basically it's another tool in our chest to deal with the caregivers in the residential areas. That's basically the gist of what the changes are. We would ask that you adopt the ordinance as presented.
Thank you. Any questions or discussion from the board? Okay, hearing none, we have a motion by Trustee Oliver, supported by Trustee Kuzmano, to amend the Township of Macomb Code of Ordinances, Chapter 12, Section 12-304, medical marijuana. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? The motion carries. Item 12 is a request to approve the amended consent judgment located at 25 Mile Road in Broughton, permanent parcels 08-03-300-008, 08-10-100-100-019, -020, and -018. Is there a motion?
So move.
Second.
Mr. Loya?
This is not my matter, this is actually Mr. Dolan.
Oh,
Actually, Mr.
Tomlinson.
Dolan, my partner,
That's
is on Zoom and can address any questions or present what is before the board.
my apologies. Mr. Dolan, are you available? Can you hear us?
Yes, I am, and thank you for allowing me to be here tonight. If anybody has any questions regarding the amendments of the consent judgment on what we've been referring to as the Northeast Broughton parcel, I'd be more than happy to answer them. On this particular parcel, there presently had existed an old consent judgment that had allowed the development of 20 residential sites, which were originally intended to be part of what would have been a platted subdivision. And replacing it now is this proposed amendment, which recognizes and addresses some significant changes in the parcel that occurred, I believe, since the adoption of the consent judgment, which include the development of wetland areas and a recognition that there's also a drain that runs through the parcel. So essentially replacing those 20 single-family home units are 25 units, which would be consisting of no fewer than 3 buildings. And of the greatest number of units per building would be 10 units. Presented to you was the consent document itself along with the drawing. The drawing currently shows a 10-unit building on one side, and then on the other side, 2 smaller buildings, which in total constitute 25 units. Included in the judgment are restrictions so that these parcels will be developed and sold as residential condominium units. There is a restriction on any rental of these condominium units. The approval of the township board would be required if at some later point in time any attempt to rent did occur. And generally that's the gist of the consent judgment on that site. If anyone has any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. And I also want to thank both Mr. Van Tiffelen and Mr. Box, who worked with me through this and did a very good job of making comments that I thought were very salient to bringing this thing to a conclusion. So with that, if anybody has any questions, I'm available to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Dolan. Are there any questions from anyone on the board? Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. We have a motion by Treasurer Gillette, supported by Clerk Posey, to approve the consent judgment on permanent parcels 08-03-300-008, 08-10-100-019, 08-10-100-020, and a portion of 08-09-200-018. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? That motion carries.
Mr. Supervisor, under that same agenda item is the consent judgment or agreement regarding the southern portion as well. So that would have to be by a separate motion.
Right. If I may, Mr. Chairman.
Sure. Go ahead, Jack.
Thanks. We also have a second parcel, which basically is across the street and pretty much is the larger parcel that's directly across from most of the township facilities. And on that parcel, again, there was a previous settlement agreement reached, and I worked with Mr. Van Tiffelen and Mr. Box, and I think we were able to tighten that up. There are restrictions, again, on rentals with regard to that site. That site, as you probably know, involves basically different uses. There are 158 multiple dwelling units, which have 2 styles of townhouse, will be developed on that site. Attached to that agreement are actual renderings and elevations which show the floor plans and the actual architectural details of those townhouses and really brownstone style buildings. In addition, there are 90 sites which will be occupied with what appears to be traditional homes as part of that development. And then there's also a smaller commercial area. Restrictions on the type of uses in the commercial area are listed out in the consent judgment. Again, similar to the other site, we have restrictions on rental absent township approval to the extent any changes are needed that are as we go through the further processes, site plan approval and engineering approval, the township, through those processes and through the township board, by virtue of the language of the document, retains control on approving those changes. And again, that's basically the terms of the document. There's an exchange of about 11 acres of land which the township is providing for development purposes to the developer. The township's receiving the use of a park by residents, which will be developed at the cost and expense of the developer, a small park. We're also receiving some paving improvements that will run through some natural wetland areas and some sidewalk extensions. This is a pretty comprehensive and large development that will be developed in phases. And the first phase will be the multiple family, followed by the residential with the commercial at the end. At the inception of the project, though, there will be improvements made at the corner, which will include signage, which will then be deeded to the township. So this is a pretty ambitious project. There's been a lot of time spent on it. Again, my thanks to Mr. Box and Mr. Van Tifflin, who worked with me on this and had raised some very good points as we went through the process. This has been a back and forth process with the developer. If you have any specific questions, I'm more than happy to answer them on this side as well.
Thank you, Mr. Dolan. Just for clarification, so we get the motion correct, this part of the consent judgment only affects parcel 0809200-018. Isn't that correct?
I don't have that parcel number directly in front of me, but it's been referred to as the Southeast Groton Project. And this is actually an amended settlement agreement. The previous approval that you did was actually an entered consent judgment. It's modified and becomes the first amended consent judgment. This becomes the first amended settlement agreement.
Mr. Thomason?
If I can clarify, the 008 parcel is the north parcel where the consent judgment is applicable to. The other three remaining parcel numbers are the south settlement agreement that we're asking for approval for.
Mr. Chair, if I may. Mr. Thomason, are they looking for a motion to approve the amended settlement agreement for those parcel numbers?
That's correct.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve the amended settlement agreement for parcel 0803300, 008, 0810, 100, 019, 0810, 100, and 020.
Do we have a second?
Did we have a motion on the floor, though?
She's making it.
We've already.
Oh, we already voted on it?
This is a second part to that, to this
We
agenda part.
had not yet made the motion.
Okay, so there was no
We
previous.
just went right into discussion, I believe.
Okay, thank you.
We still need a second on Clerk Posey's motion.
I'll second it.
Mr. Chairman, I have some questions now.
Sure.
Is it currently in litigation, the second portion of the motion? Or is
I can address that question if you'd like, Mr. Chairman.
Please.
That has been resolved. The second matter that we're now discussing and is before you as a presented motion involved a settlement agreement that was finalized and executed before the circuit court. So that was a completed case that was ended. That particular judge did not want a judgment entered, and instead the case was resolved through entry of a settlement agreement and dismissal.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Are we amending a consent judgment on two completely different parcels of property?
Can Mr.
It's a little
Nolan?
confusing, and I'll address that. The first and smaller parcel on the north was an entered consent judgment. You're basically, by stipulation, presenting to the court in that case an amended consent judgment. what makes the second parcel a little different is that particular judge did not want to see a consent judgment entered, and that matter was resolved through the entry of a settlement agreement as part of the record in the proceeding, then a dismissal. So what we're doing here is we're basically amending the settlement agreement that was originally executed. This will be a binding document on both parties. Legal descriptions will be provided. It will be recorded with the Register of the Deeds. It will be a matter of record and notice to all purchase any portion of the
So
property that's included.
Maybe Mike,
in
maybe
the
I'm not clarifying. I apologize, Mr. Dolan, for interrupting, but it's not clear to me whether we're dealing with two different projects on two different parcels, completely different parcels of property. It sounded like one, we are amending an old consent agreement with a new consent agreement involving 28 condominiums. And then it sounds like, at least it sounds like to me like there's a second major parcel of property with a much more significant development that we're agreeing to terms on. And they sound like they're two
That's
different.
correct.
And so my guess.
There are two separate legal proceedings that you are acting on.
Okay.
First is a consent judgment, and that consent judgment, as mentioned, was actually entered back in 2005 before the Honorable James Biernatt Jr. Second document is a settlement agreement. That was a case filed in 2018 before Judge Catherine Viviano. They are two separate legal proceedings involving separate parcels. But they are developed by the same developer. The style of the buildings presented, the renderings attached to each of the judgments are basically the same for each of these two developments in terms of the style of the multifamily.
So, Mr. Dolan, if I can maybe just put this in simple terms, and correct me if I get this wrong, but these are two separate legal matters. This is one project for the developer, and these two items they might be separate legal matters, but they are related. Correct?
Absolutely. They're absolutely related, and I'm sure from the developer's perspective, he sees this globally as a single project, even though they involve two court proceedings.
Right, because we have some legal technicalities we had to work out. There are two separate legal proceedings, which is why we're having two separate votes, two separate motions.
I think they're one motion.
Exactly.
No, they're going to be two motions. Okay.
You just made the second motion.
Gotcha. All right, I appreciate that clarification. Thank you.
Okay, so we are still to have the motion on the settlement agreement. Is there any more discussion or questions on it?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. Is it true to say that the settlement agreement from 2018 would be enforceable but in a court of law should either party vary from the terms and conditions?
Yes, there's a clause specifically in both agreements that refer to that court remains available to petition should there arise any issues surrounding the enforcement of the judgment.
And just one last question, Mr. Chairman. Does it include a release and waiver clause that basically settling any and all causes of action, known and unknown? Is that?
These were originally, yes, basically what had occurred is originally in the first documents that had occurred, I'm looking right now. If I'm looking at in the first amended settlement agreement on page 11, paragraph G, it states, upon execution of this agreement, it will resolve all pending claims and close the case, and except as provided by this agreement, all claims asserted in the litigation, including any claims for money damages, attorney fees, and costs, are merged into this agreement and are forever barred. basically the same provision in the consent judgment. I can read that if you want me to
No,
find it and
that's
read
all
it to
right.
you. But
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That satisfies my question.
Thank you, trustee Kuzma. Anything else? All right, so we have a motion by Clerk Posey, supported by trustee Oliver, to adopt the settlement agreement.
Amended.
They adopt the amended settlement agreement for 08-03-300-008, 08-10-100-019, and parcel 08-10-100-020. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Dolan.
thank you.
All right, moving on to public comment. We now have public comment for any non-agenda item. If anyone wishes to speak digitally, please raise your hand.
Did we vote twice on that item?
If you wish to, those of you in the gallery are welcome to approach the podium.
Ben Cochran. I turned the petitions in last week. I get it could take a couple weeks. Just had a quick question. The board here didn't understand a $211.26 charge, so they wanted to get more information to find out what it was about. The pathway project that's going on is $1.3 million. You have 4 funds that are dead even, some losing money. Every resident I've talked to up and down is not interested in it. And I get progress, and I understand moving forward it is needed. There's some sections in the layout that it's not. The whole area is going to be decimated. So my question for the board is, do you have any intention of actually putting it on the agenda so it can be talked about?
Public comment typically is not a back and forth, but the time for those discussions is not during a board meeting. And we'd be happy to, if you want to contact my office, we can have those conversations.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else in the gallery? Yeah, Mr. Ivanowski, anyone digitally wants to speak? All right, seeing that there is no more public comment, we're going to move on to board comments. Trustee Oliver.
One thing, just thank Stacy and your staff on this budget. A lot of work. Thank the supervisor that worked along with it. I know budgets are not easy, especially municipal budgets. They're not like personal budgets. You look at if you got enough or if you don't got enough. It's that simple. But when you work with taxpayers' money, everything's so specific and detailed. And I know that takes a lot of time, so just kudos for you guys. Okay.
Thank you, Trustee Oliver. Trustee Kuzmano.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the speaker just in public comment mentioned the 211-26. I spoke up about that because I was concerned about it. He can bring those matters to the supervisor outside of the board meeting, and then it's the process, as I understand it, is that you'll make a decision whether or not to put it before the board, and that he could approach a trustee, and if the trustee could get 3 other trustees to put it on the agenda, then it would be
2 other trustees. I
2
believe.
other trustees to place it on the agenda. So, if no one speaks up, then that would have just passed. So, I had recently had a conversation with Jim Sawyer, the president of Macomb Community College, and I said, I'm a price-driven trustee. He said, oh, no, not you, Frank. I've been on the board for over 10 years at the college, and I've tested just about every vendor and every contract. there's always going to be disagreement and tension. It's a natural consequence of legislative process. I have no doubts of the integrity and the intentions of members of this board. As to the legal counsel issues, I'm surprisingly enough, as an attorney, I don't believe in litigation. And Mr. Tomlinson and Mr. Aloya are capable and respected and fine lawyers. It's no disrespect to brother counsel, but I want to drive as hard of a bargain as practical for the taxpayers. It's just the way that was put together when I was conceived. My father always used to tell me, you can tell a good buyer because the first question out of his mouth is how much. So that's my starting point always is it reasonable and necessary? And are we getting the best value for the taxpayer dollar? But again, I want to congratulate the board on the budget that was prepared. It's moving appropriately in the right direction, and I want to thank the supervisor's office and the finance department for doing the hard work of allocating and projecting these expenditures and revenue streams. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And thank you, Trustee Kuzma. Trustee Lucido.
Nothing for me tonight.
Trustee Nevers.
I would just like to thank Stacy and the effort that she put forth on this budget, and for the 3 full-time
Elected officials.
Yes, thank you. And for allowing anybody that wanted to come in and look at the budget and have Stacy go over it, with a fine-tooth comb. So I appreciate that opportunity. And good job. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Nevers. Trustee Drillette.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. I just wanted to point out very, very briefly some of the elements of this budget that I think are most significant. And I think everyone's rightly praised our finance department and Stacy for being amazingly capable of pulling together a very complex set of information, set of numbers, set of projections, having a knowledge of the history of each and every fund, every department head that's come before the elected officials and went through their budget and talked about their needs and the work that they put in. And as a result of that work by our departments, by our employees, by our finance department, and our elected officials, there's a number of elements of this budget that I think are significant. One is the budget is balanced, and that should go without saying, but many budgets go into what's called the fund balance, where they end up projecting to spend more than they're taking in, and they eat away at savings. We approach this budget, I think, with the support of our supervisor, as we are not going to spend more than we take in. The budget will be balanced. So this budget is built to be balanced and not to go into any reserve funds. Therefore, we continue to maintain a very healthy fund balance that will be there in case the economy takes a significant downturn or projects skyrocket even more than anticipated. That reserve fund is a very healthy 100% reserve balance. Another element of this budget we haven't had a chance to touch on yet is that in a few of the areas we are actually been able to look at tweaking back the tax burden on our residents. So, for example, our fire department millage has been bringing in more revenue than we anticipate needing to use to fully fund that operation. So this budget contains a 5% cut in the tax for the fire department for residents. Similarly, our police department budget has been also bringing in more revenue than we anticipate needing to fully fund that department. So we're not cutting those departments. We're not cutting the police department or fire department, but we are cutting the tax 3% for the for the police millage. So the budget contains small tax cuts. We'd like to be able to do more, but things are getting expensive. But we will be able to reduce somewhat the tax burden on residents and those two taxes. Finally, the budget contains the new park, Pitchford Park, which was a donated property to the township for free, and we are funding development of Pitchford Park using the sale of excess township properties. For For example, this week, we just sold 2 lots that the township had inherited years ago that had been sitting vacant doing nothing. But by selling them, we were able to bring in over $150,000. And we've got other township parcels that we'll be selling and using those revenues to develop the new park. So ultimately, the goal is the park will be a net zero cost, free land, selling excess properties, using those funds to develop the park so that residents have a new park that they can enjoy. And really, other than that, major road improvements, even though we didn't get to fund as many as we'd like because of the cost skyrocketing, there are major road improvements in this budget, particularly along 23 Mile Road, the extension of Garfield Road, and beginning the project of tackling 22 Mile Road and Romeo Plank intersection, which has been a disaster for a very, very long time. So there is money in this budget to begin the process of reforming and completely redeveloping that intersection as a roundabout and to move that traffic along much better. And finally, this budget has achieved some of these goals by reductions in costs. One of it was the vehicle fleet management by turning that over and outsourcing our fleet management with the help of our facilities and grounds folks. We're able to save $300,000 in this upcoming budget just by doing that project. And thankfully, with the help of our finance department and the board, we've refinanced bonds and saved money this coming year and in years into the future, up to $1 million by refinancing the bond. There's a number of other small cuts that were made in order to achieve these results, but ultimately, the budget is balanced. It cuts taxes. It funds what we think are the highest priorities that we can afford, and it provides a new park for residents at essentially no cost. So I think this budget is a significant accomplishment, and those that have been involved, from every employee, every department head, our finance department, our elected officials, should be very proud of the budget proposal before us. Thank you.
Thank you, Treasurer Dlott. Clerk Posey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not to mirror what everyone else has said, but from a different angle, it's being on this board and experiencing this budgeting process already for 4 years previously. Stacy and I would often look at each other, and we seemed to be the only one that was really diving into the actual numbers line by line and questioning why we were doing some of the things that we were doing. I would just like to say that it was, this budget process was energetic. Everybody was working together with dynamic ideas on how we could balance the budget, how we could still move forward with some projects. All our department heads had to put in extra hours, time, and work because we were continually calling them back to the table and saying, what if, and can you, and how about? And they were all worked very well with us to accomplish the same goal. So to mirror what Mr. Cusimano had said, we're moving in the right direction. And for me, it was a wonderful experience. It's exactly what I've wanted to see happen. And it was due to the efforts of everybody on this board and all the department heads working together. So that was a big change for me, and I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you, Clerk Posey. I'd like to mention a few things. First, I'd like to echo everyone's praise of our finance director, Stacy Smith. You did a great job. Got a couple more weeks to put our final touches on things before we present the final budget at the next meeting. Sorry that you had to put up with the three of us as we came up with all kinds of quirky ways of fixing the budget. It was a unique experience to me, but I found it actually to be very fascinating when we got through it pretty well, I think. Town Hall is officially back open for business. The hours have been returned to the normal operating hours of 8 to 4:30. We have removed the contact tracing that was in the lobby. Guests are now free to come and go. We are, of course, still abiding by the orders that are in place, meaning that if you are fully vaccinated, you're certainly welcome to come in and do your business with no mask. However, we ask anyone who is not fully vaccinated, please be respectful of the other guests in the building and wear your mask while you're on the grounds. I also was going to mention that we sold our first 2 properties, but Treasurer Gillette beat me to it. Sorry. Pretty excited about being able to develop something as significant as a public park with nothing but cash, which we are going to be continuing to sell other excess property inventory over the next 6 months to a year And hopefully by the time we're done developing the park, we will have sold more property, at least in dollars, than the park has cost us. So that's something that's unique to us. We haven't done that in, as far as I know, and I'm really looking forward to how that develops. The marijuana ordinance that we all have been talking about for the last few months, it took effect finally on Monday of this week. In addition to the marijuana ordinance itself taking effect, on Monday, our fire marshal put out a fire bulletin. It's P21-001. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with the fire bulletins are issues that are typically identified by our fire marshal, who is our fire chief Phillips. In this case, recognizing things that are at great risk to our residents. In this particular fire bulletin addresses the dangers of excess power consumption. I mentioned in earlier comments that enterprises like growing marijuana in a residential house that pull so much power through the building's electrical grid, the meter, the pedestal, tend to overload it. We've seen a number of buildings where the wiring has melted. Power meters have been destroyed and had to be replaced by TTE. And interestingly enough, a few days prior to the issuance of this bulletin, one of our neighborhood homes, the pedestal caught on fire, and fire had to be dispatched to deal with that. So we're going to have this up on our website in the next couple of days. I encourage anyone who is considering undertaking one of these enterprises to check out the details and make sure you're in compliance, and also to check out our zoning ordinance regarding medical marijuana. And I want to thank all of our department heads, our sheriff's office, and our fire department who have helped us address this issue, and Mr. Tomlinson and his assistance has been greatly appreciated. Our mailers for our sprinkler ordinance marketing program should be
In the mail.
in the mail. You should be hitting the mailboxes soon. We've actually had a fairly good response already. Those of our residents who've found out about it through the newspapers have called, and we have a number of, I think about 50 was the number?
I think it's 36 or so that have
36
already
residents have already scheduled their appointment to have their timers set to be in compliance with our ordinance. And hopefully, as more residents become aware of our ordinance, those who are not already aware, we will work towards controlling our peak water usage, and thereby, we hope, avoid any excess overages that will keep us from having any significant water increases. So that is all the comments I have for tonight. At this time, we are going to have a motion to go into closed session. Is there a motion to, let's see what this is. So,
I make a motion that we go into closed session to discuss consent judgment pending litigation, Macomb County Circuit Court Case 2019-004506-CC, Macomb Township versus the State of Anna M. Denowith.
pursuant to MCL 15.268E.
etc.
Okay.
Second.
I think that
Any
requires a roll call.
Yes, any discussion on that motion? We have a motion by Treasurer Gillette, supported by Clerk Posey, to go into closed session to discuss case number 2019-004506-CC. Clerk Posey, will you call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Treasurer Drollet.
Yes.
Clerk Posey, yes. Trustee Kuzimano.
Yes.
Trustee Lucido.
Yes.
Trustee Oliver.
Yes.
Trustee Nevers.
Yes.
And Supervisor Viviano.
Yes. That motion carries. We are now going into closed session. The time is 7:34 p.m. We are going to return from closed session, and the time is 7:54 p.m. Do I have a motion for the business that was discussed in closed session?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board authorize legal counsel and the supervisor to sign a consent judgment in Macomb County Circuit Court Case 2019-4506-CC, Macomb Township versus the State of Anna M. Denowith, in the amount of $35,344 for just compensation for the property and statutory attorney fees and costs, all inclusive.
Support.
Is that Ben?
Is there any discussion on trustee Kuzmano's motion? Okay, hearing none. There's a motion by trustee Kuzmano, supported by trustee Lozito, to enter into this agreement in the case of Macomb Township v. Estate of Anna M. Denowith. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That motion carries. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Chair, what time is the motion to adjourn?
I don't know, how much longer can I drag it out?
7:55.
It's that motion to adjourn at 7:55? Is that the motion?
Motion to adjourn at 7:55.
Okay.
I don't even know who made
It's
it.
like the
Who made the motion? Trustee Clerk Posey?
Yes.
And who supported it?
Kuzmano.
There is a motion by Clerk Posey to adjourn, supported by trustee
Discussion, please.
Kuzmano.
Discussion on the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. This meeting is adjourned.